When we think of cryptids, creatures that normally come to mind are ones such as Bigfoot, the Mothman, and the Loch Ness Monster, but there are many lesser known ones on that ever-expanding list. Growing up, I would hear my grandpa mention weird creatures like the Wampus Cat, Hillside Mody-Doat, and Treetop Pixie Dixie. Now I'm pretty sure those last two were ones he made up, but I would later come to find out that the Wampus Cat is more of a well-known cryptid, and in doing research for my cryptozoology video on Bigfoot, I came across a group of cryptids known as Fearsome Critters, and Bigfoot and the Wampus Cat were both in this group. The tales of fearsome critters were usually passed around by lumberjacks at logging camps in the early 1900s. One person would tell their fellow lumberjacks about a noise they heard at night or a shadow they saw in the corner of their eye, and one of their friends would usually join in on the gag. If you think about it, they were basically an early version of creepypastas. But a man by the name of Henry Tryon wrote a book about the tales of fearsome critters, and one passage describes how these tales usually come about. Sam would lead with a colorful bit of description, and Walter would follow suit with an arresting spot of personal experience, every detail being set forth with the utmost solemnity, and with exactly the correct degrees of emphasis. At the end, so deftly had the cards been played that the listener was completely convinced of the animal's existence. This method of presentation is widely used, such inquiries being invariable accorded a grave, corroborative nod. Lumberjacks would pass the tales at different camps across North America over the years, and of course many of these tales were just that, tall tales. Lumberjacks would often use these tales to pass the time or as a means to haze newcomers to the camps. You see, while people in the business world might stay at a hotel out of town if they're on a business trip, lumberjacks would stay at logging camps, usually during the wintertime, in order to cut down trees in a large area. And then once all the trees are cut, they would move on to a different camp or go back home. Basic camps consisted of a cookhouse and a bunkhouse, but larger camps might have an outhouse, barns, blacksmith shops, filer shacks to sharpen saw blades, offices, and camp stores. The camps were usually built in the fall prior to the logging season, using materials from the trees they cut down. But after World War II, logging camps got phased out due to improved transportation, which is why you don't hear about fearsome critters anymore. But getting to the critters, most appear to be more comical in nature as opposed to scary, and many lumberjacks emphasize their behavioral traits rather than physical descriptions, with a lot of the critters being regular, well-known animals that behaved unusually. But many lumberjacks would actually experience something strange and unusual, and use these tales to try to explain the unexplained, such as why one of their fellow lumberjacks never came back after disappearing into the forest. People go missing all the time in national parks under weird and unusual circumstances, just taking a look at the missing 411 cases, so it's not unreasonable to think the lumberjacks might have gone missing more than you think. In this video though, I want to cover some of the fearsome critters that were talked about at these camps over the years. However, when I was looking through investigating these creatures, I found out that there's hundreds of them, with some with more details than others. Because of that, I'm only going to be talking about the ones listed in the Fearsome Critters Wikipedia page, since they seem to be the most well-known and popular. But if you guys want to see me cover all the fearsome critters on my channel, make sure to like and subscribe so I know that you want to see more content like this, and leave a comment saying you want to learn more about these strange creatures. But without further ado, let's explore the tales of the fearsome critters. Listed among the fearsome critters are famous cryptids such as Bigfoot, the Jackalope, and the Jersey Devil. As I said at the start of the video, I'm working on a cryptozoology video on Bigfoot, and as some of you know, that's just part of the huge cryptozoology series I have in production on my channel. So if you guys don't mind, I'll save those ones for those videos when I get around to making them. But getting into the first fearsome critter I want to talk about, which is the one that led me to the creation of this video, we have the Agropelter. The Agropelter, sometimes referred as the Agropelter, is described as an ape-like creature similar to Bigfoot, albeit much smaller. It's been known to inhabit hollow trees in the conifer woods from Maine all the way to Oregon. It's described as being most related to the African baboon, but what sets the Agropelter apart from other apes is its arms. Stories say the Agropelter has long whip-like arms that are used to snap off dead tree branches and hurl them through the air like shells from a 6-inch gun, also using acorns, pine cones, fruit, and birds' nests as ammunition. Getting a little gruesome here, it's said that the Agropelter rips the hands off of its victims and connects those hands to their arms by fusing the bones, nerves, and veins, and then stuffs the victims in hollow tree trunks. And apparently the more hands it has collected, the stronger and more accurate the Agropelter becomes. The only known survivor of the Agropelter attack is a man by the name of Big Ol' Kittleson, who escaped by a rotted tree branch falling on the Agropelter's head, and he's who we get these descriptions from. Some other notes about the Agropelter is that its diet consists of woodpeckers, barred owls, and dozy rotted wood. Its pups are born on February 29th and are always in odd numbers, usually 3 or 5. Although it may appear villainous in nature, the Agropelter isn't evil, but instead protects its home in the forests that lumberjacks try to chop down. Moving on to the next critter, we have the Axehandle Hound. The Axehandle Hound is described as a small dog with short stubby legs, a slender body like an axe handle, and an axe head shaped head, to where it gets its name from in part. Very creative, I know. Although the Axehandle Hound may have a dangerously shaped head, it isn't deadly, but rather more of a mischief maker. It's said to be a nocturnal creature, traveling from logging camp to logging camp in the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and feasting solely on axe handles, also giving it its name. Some tales even say it hates the taste of handles made from red oak. There's even a campground in Minnesota named after the Axehandle Hound. There isn't much behind the story of this fearsome critter, but before I move on to the next one, I want to read a short newspaper excerpt from 1925. This was from the 12 Yarns of the Woods stories collected by Art Childs, who was formerly a game warden in northern Wisconsin. An autumn chill had crept into the air, and the brushwood bonfire, sending its little fingers of light into the unfriendly darkness, was the gathering place for the hunting party. "Guess I'll cut some wood and pile it up for the night," suggested the link guide, unfolding himself from his comfortable position in the fire glow. He disappeared in the cavern of darkness. A few minutes he was back. "Doggone if I can find my axe," he remarked. "Near as I can remember, I had it last night, down by the big oak." He made another dash into the night, only to return empty-handed. "My own fault," he muttered. "I reckon the Axehandle Hound's got it all right." "The Axehandle Hound? Go on," grinned one of the party. "Mean to say you never heard the Axehandle Hound?" The guide cocked a solemn eye at him. "One of the worst nuisance in these here woods. It's about 1.5 times as big as an axe handle and looks like its name, having a long body cover with rope-colored hair and a hatchet face with saw teeth and cross-cut eyes. The darn thing prowls around at night looking for axe handles, which is the only kind of food it's ever known to touch. Nicest axe I ever had," bemoaned the guide as he made another sally off into the night in search of the axe, or the hound. The next creature on our Chinese zodiac of fearsome critters is a ball-tailed cat. If you don't get the joke, it's because cats, dogs, and monkeys are all animals on the Chinese zodiac, and we've had an ape, dog, and now cat-themed critter. Anyways, the ball-tailed cat has a very similar appearance to a wildcat or mountain lion, but what sets this creature apart is, you guessed it, its long tail with a hard, bony ball at the end of it. I just want to take a second to say you're going to start noticing a pattern, if you haven't already, that half the fearsome critters are just named after the actions that the creatures do, or their physical appearances, and the other half are just wild names that sound like complete gibberish. I would have loved to be around when they were naming some of these creatures, just to ask them what their thought process was. Sorry to get off track for a second, but the ball-tailed cat has clawed feet and is said to be an excellent climber, lying on top of branches, waiting for the unsuspecting lumberjack to walk below them until the cat pounces on the lumberjack and pounds them to death with the ball in their tail. Previously, the ball-tailed cat could be found all over North America, but now it's said to be located in only 2 locations, Harney County, Oregon, and Sullivan County, Pennsylvania. There are also 2 very similar fearsome critters to the ball-tailed cat, those being the silver cat and digmaw. If I do a follow-up to this video, I'll talk about them more. But the main difference to note are the spiked tails the silver cat and digmaw have, compared to the ball-tailed cat's smooth tail. Their tails are similar and designed to weapons like a spiked club or mace, and comparisons have also been made between all 3 of them and the Ankylosaurus, a dinosaur with a clubbed tail. With our next critter, we have another fellow feline, the Cactus Cat. Tales of this creature date back to the 19th century throughout American Southwest, specifically in California, Nevada, New Mexico, and even Colorado. Pioneers and cowboys would pass along stories of the Cactus Cat, describing it as a bobcat-like animal with thorns all over its fur and sharp bones protruding from its legs and its tail. Late at night, the Cactus Cat would slash open cacti to expose its sap, then return later once it had been fermented to get intoxicated off of it, stumbling around and keeping it in a docile state. It's even said that if you listen closely, you could hear the haunting wail of the Cactus Cat, along with the sound of its protruding bones rubbing together. As I said though, the Cactus Cat has always been portrayed as pretty docile and rarely attacking humans, although it has been known to attack and leave victims dead if they try stealing its fermented sap from the cacti it slashed open. In the 2015 Fearsome Creatures book, which is a more modernized and darker take on the fearsome critters, it's speculated that the Cactus Cat could even be related to other fearsome critter cats, like the previously mentioned Wampus Cat and ball-tailed cats. I also want to mention that the Cactus Cat appeared in the Cartoon Network show The Secret Saturdays, just because that was one of my favorite shows growing up and partially inspired my fascination with cryptozoology and other weird mysteries. But now, let's talk about one of those fearsome critters with an absurd name, the Dungavenhooter. Apologies if I got that wrong. Dating back to the 19th and 20th centuries, this creature is said to inhabit the swamplands of Maine and Michigan and has the appearance of an alligator. However, what sets this creature apart from other alligators is that it doesn't have a mouth, but what it does have is large nostrils, and the only sound it produces is a snort. The Dungavenhooter preys upon its victims by first silently waiting behind some brush and then knocks them over with its powerful tail. It then repeatedly jumps up and down on its victims until vapors are produced, to which it then inhales the vapors, and it's also said to be favorable to rum-drunk people. From what I can tell, it sounds like the Dungavenhooter completely vaporizes its prey, not just getting the prey to produce vapors. To which I gotta say, imagine how long and how much force it would take to turn someone into a gaseous state. That's just completely wild to me, but funny at the same time. But next up on the list is an interesting creature known as the Glawackus. I'm sure there's a joke to be made there somewhere, but I'm not going to attempt to make it. But this one actually has an origin for its name, to which I'm super happy about and I'll get to in a second. Also dating back to the 19th and 20th centuries, the Glawackus, otherwise known as the Northern Devil Cat, is described as a beast that's a cross between a bear, lion, and panther with the laugh of a hyena. It's said to be blind and uses smell and sonar for its senses, but has a mystical property about it as well, as whoever looks into the Glawackus' eyes will lose their memory. If you're from the state of Connecticut, you might have heard of the newspaper, the Hartford Courant. Back during World War II, that newspaper was hearing reports of a creature from Glastonbury, Connecticut that howled at night, would disappear and cause cats, dogs, and small farm animals to disappear, as one reporter recounted. The reporter also said that as the sightings increased, so did the discrepancies of the creature, with people saying it looked like a cat, then half cat, half dog, then vice versa, with one man claiming to see the Glawackus' eyes glowing in ember color. As the sightings increased, the newspaper realized they needed a name for it, and one editor came up with the Glawackus, Gla being short for Glastonbury, the town where it was sighted, Whack for wacky, and then us for a Latin word ending, and the name from there stuck. There was even a safari organized to hunt the Glawackus, but they came up empty-handed. Our next fearsome critter is another bear-like creature, the Gumberoo. What sets the Gumberoo apart from a normal bear is its size being bigger than normal, and also being hairless apart from eyebrow and chin hair, with a tough, shiny black hide that makes it invulnerable to rocks, arrows, and even bullets. The only way to harm the Gumberoo is by setting it on fire, to which the creature would burn like celluloid and proceed to explode. In the 19th and 20th centuries, lumberjacks would note that during Cedar Woods forest fires near Coos Bay, loud, unusual sounds could be heard, followed by the smell of burning rubber. It's even said that if photos of the creature were taken, the photo negatives would explode as well. Gumberoos are said to live along the Pacific coast from Grace Harbor to Humboldt Bay, making their dens out of burnout cedar trees. Although the Gumberoo spends most of its time hibernating, when they leave in search for food, they would eat any living creature in their path, including a whole horse. Even so, the Gumberoo is usually depicted as a gentle giant, being slow and not annoyed by its enemies, although the previously mentioned 2015 Fearsome Creatures book paints it in a more menacing light, almost giving it a cosmic horror aspect. Although some people claim to know the explanation behind this creature, it's likely we'll never know the real truth behind the Gumberoo. With our next fearsome critter, we get our first example of a critter without a physical description and is only known for its behavior. This is a Hidebehind. If you've watched Gravity Falls, or have read J.K. Rowling's Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, you might have heard of the Hidebehind. The only known information we have on the Hidebehind is that it's a nocturnal, large, and powerful creature that can never directly be seen. If someone attempts to look at it, it will quickly hide behind something, or the observer. It kind of reminds me of the double slit experiment with quantum physics, if you have any idea what that is, but that's way too complicated to explain for the purpose of this video, so I'll just throw up this meme about it for a second, and let you guys do your own research. It's said that the Hidebehind uses their incognito ability to stalk lumberjacks without being seen and attacks them without warning, proceeding to drag the lumberjacks back to their lairs and consume them. Hidebehinds are said to mainly eat the intestines of their victims, but have severe distaste for alcohol, so that can be used as a repellent. Hidebehinds are usually used to explain the random disappearances of lumberjacks who are never seen again, like, hey, where did Jim go? I haven't seen him in a while. Oh, the Hidebehind must have gotten to him. I guess we'll never see him again. But since we just talked about a fearsome critter with no physical description, let's move on to one with a more in-depth description, the Hodag. With the Hodag, we have a little more information on it than other critters. It was featured prominently in early Paul Bunyan stories, and it's been seen in a lot of more modern media, such as in Scooby-Doo and Harry Potter. It's also been seen as a card in the video game Inscription that you might have seen YouTubers like Markiplier play. But the Hodag is a mysterious cryptid from Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and is described as having the head of a frog, or bear, and the grinning face of an elephant with protruding tusks, the horns of a bison, a large lizard-like body with the back of a dinosaur with spines, thick legs with huge claws, and a long tail with spears at the end. So the Hodag is basically just an amalgamation of multiple well-known animals or a modern chimera. It's also said that the Hodag is a carnivore and born from the ashes of a cremated ox, now incarnated into the embodiment of abuse suffered by animals at the hands of their owners. The physical description of the Hodag we have is from a newspaper back in 1893, and after reading the newspaper, a man by the name Eugene Shepard set off with a group of locals to capture the Hodag. Shepard was well known as a Wisconsin land surveyor, timber cruiser, and prankster, so you can imagine what followed. Shepard's group claimed dynamite was needed to kill the Hodag, and released a photograph supposedly showing the charred Hodag with this caption: "The fiercest, strangest, most frightening monster ever to set razor-sharp claws on the earth. It became extinct after its main food source, all-white bulldogs, became scarce in the area." Years later, in 1896, Shepard created a hoax of the Hodag, claiming to capture it alive using chloroform to knock it out. He displayed it in a county fair and used wires to move the fake Hodag. After the story got picked up nationally, scientists from the Smithsonian became interested and traveled to Rhinelander, Wisconsin to inspect the Hodag, to which Shepard had to admit his captured Hodag was a fake. But we might never know the truth behind the original sightings of the Hodag. To the town of Rhinelander, the Hodag is a bit of a celebrity and celebrated, now the mascot of their local high school, multiple businesses, and the namesake for their music festival. But now transitioning from the Hodag, we have the similarly sounding Hugag. The Hugag has a lot less information about it than the Hodag, but it's described as a tall, moose-like animal that roams the Great Lakes region from northern Minnesota, western Wisconsin, and the Canadian wilds towards Hudson Bay. Although upon first glance, a Hugag may look like a moose, it has a few key differences, one being the jointless legs it has, preventing the Hugag from laying down, and the overly long upper lip it has, preventing it from grazing. Although the word Hugag has been used in past for different names, Hugag was first used as a name for this fearsome critter in the 1900s in a book by S.W. Brown, who only goes on to say that the Hugag has round feet with claws on all sides to prevent discernment on its direction of travel, and also describes it as being not as ferocious as other beasts in the forest. In the 1910s Fearsome Creatures book, we get the description of the Hugag with the legs and lips, along with other notable features such as having a leathery and hairless head and neck, corrugated ears that flop down, four-toed feet, long bushy tail, and shaggy coat. The previously mentioned Henry Tryon goes on to add other characteristics such as warts on its snout, bumps on its head, and pine needles instead of hairs. Other details I want to note is that its diet consists of twigs, bark, and pine knots, and when the Hugag sleeps, it has to lean up against a tree since it can't lie down. According to stories, the Hugag is allegedly extinct now after the last one was killed in Turtle River, Minnesota, when a young 1,800-pound Hugag was found stuck in the mud, and the others were hunted by Hugag hunters, causing trees to be weak enough to fall on a Hugag if one were to lean up against it. I have to say, I can tell natural selection did not favor the Hugag one bit. Now, with most of the fearsome critters, they were usually used as storytelling purposes or to explain weird things like I previously said, but the Hugag doesn't really seem to have any of this or any interesting stories behind its origin or anything, which is kind of unfortunate. But it may have originated from stories from Aristotle or Caesar, who claimed animals like elephants and elk couldn't lie down or bend their knees. But there's also some speculation that the Hugag is a surviving dinosaur species called the Paraceratherium. I have no clue how I got that right. But that's not out of the realm of possibility, considering many people believe the Loch Ness Monster is a modern-day plesiosaur. But now, let's talk about the Sidehill Gouger, otherwise known as the Sidehill Dodger, Sidehill Hoofer, Sidehill Gaznick, Sidehill Osel, Sidehill Loper, Sidehill Galoot, Gyathtis, Sidewinder, Wampus, Boofum, Goodafro, Hunkus, Rickaboo Racker, Proc, Gwinter, or Cuttercuss. These names all came about due to its popularity with the early Americans, kind of like a big game of telephone over the years, with people either getting the name slightly wrong when telling friends about the creature, or straight up not remembering and just making up a new name. And now, I'm making the executive decision that the Sidehill Gouger is the same creature that my grandpa called the Hillside Mody-Doat, so from now on that's what I'm going to be calling it since the names are so similar. Let's make this a thing and get it trending, guys. The Hillside Mody-Doat. Don't ask me how to spell it though, but I want you guys to let me know in the comments which variation of the name is your favorite and why. I'd love to see your answers. But just as a Hillside Mody-Doat, has multiple names. It has many different descriptions of its appearance. Some describe the Hillside Mody-Doat as a deer with rabbit ears and fangs, while others describe it as a giant lizard. A man by the name of John Dash here described it as having a similar appearance to a razorback hog. Some depict the creature as having a powerful tail to allow it to swing from trees, but the main consistency in their appearance is their legs though. Hillside Mody-Doats are said to have their legs shorter on one side, allowing them to walk on steep hillsides, but this can be problematic for them if they get chased to a flat plain, as it would cause them to be trapped in an endless circle. They could then be easily captured or starved to death if this happens. It's also said that the Hillside Mody-Doat is responsible for the creation of the Hodag and Terraset land formations. Going into some more in-depth details about the creature, it's said that they live in hillside burrows and are sometimes depicted as laying eggs, having 6 to 8 pups per litter. If one that travels clockwise meets one that travels counterclockwise, they have to fight to the death since it can only go in one direction. There's plenty of other stories I could tell about the creature, but just so I don't make half the video about the Hillside Mody-Doat, I'll leave this one off on their geography, supposedly migrating west from New England and seen all over the US, particularly in Vermont and Wisconsin though. Next up on our list is another feline critter called the Splintercat. We have a little bit of a shorter and more concise tail with this entry to the list than the previous one, but just like with the Hidebehind, we don't have a physical description for the Splintercat, just that it's a cat. Instead, the Splintercat is known for the unusual behavior it exhibits on dark and stormy nights. The nocturnal Splintercat is said to charge headfirst into trees, using its hard head to knock branches off and break open trees in search for food. Their diet consists of raccoons and honey, and they'll continuously break open trees until they find a hollow one containing the sustenance they're searching for. The results of these actions usually leave forests destroyed in places with all of the splintered and broken trees, and usually leave the Splintercat with a constant headache, putting it in a bad mood. So, if you ever find one, it's not advised that you approach it. The dead tree snags it leaves behind are commonly seen in the Pacific Northwest, but the creature is said to be found all over North America, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf, all the way eastward to the Atlantic, and occasionally seen in the Rockies. There's an alternative version of the Splintercat that comes from Nova Scotia, Canada, and describes the creature as having long claws, powerful legs, and fur colored similarly to the bark of their favorite tree. During the winter, frost expanding causes trees to crack, but the legend says that this is the sound of a Splintercat emerging from a tree after a long summer hibernation. So far in this video, I've been just going down the list on the Wikipedia page in order, but to break it up, I want to skip forwards a bit, so let's talk about the only fish on the list for today, the fur-bearing trout. Now you should all know this, but for some reason you don't, fish don't normally have fur. They have scales, which is what makes the fur-bearing trout an interesting cryptid. And I say normally because there's 2 examples of fish with hair-like growths on them, those being the saprolegnia, otherwise known as the cotton mold, a type of fungus-like organism that can affect fish and cause them to appear to be covered in white fur. And there is the Mirapina esau, otherwise known as the hairy fish, and also named after Esau from the Bible, who was a hairy man. The tales of the fur-bearing trout date back to the 17th century in Icelandic folklore, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to be looking at the origins of the fur-bearing trout in the US. It's said that the waters in the Arkansas River can get so cold during the wintertime that the trout will grow fur to keep warm, but if the fish were to be removed, the atmospheric temperature difference would cause the trout to explode, and the skin and fur would come off in one piece, leaving the fur to be used for commercial purposes and the body for eating. By the time summer comes around, the trout will shed their fur due to the warmer temperatures. And I promise you guys aren't ready for this one, but an alternate tale claims that the trout grew fur due to the spilling of 2 bottles or 4 jugs of hair tonic into the river. And to catch the fish, fishermen would act as barbers and offer the trout a free trim or a shave. When I was writing the script, all I could think of for this part was a video of the guy giving a chicken a shave for his KFC interview. So yeah. But there's another tale out of Maine that the hairy trout were under a catch and release order enforced by the game warden. If the fish were the exact same length as a fisherman's foot size, they could keep the fish, eat it, and use the pelt to make furry slippers. Hearing about absurd tales like that is just what made this video so fun to research. It's just a nice change of pace compared to hearing about how the world is falling apart in the news all the time. So I'm all here for these stories, even if they do sound completely dumb at times. But moving on from fish, we have similarly scaled serpents. The first one for this video is a hoop snake. So, you guys all know how a snake moves. It slithers slowly across the ground. It doesn't have legs like other reptiles that move. However, the hoop snake doesn't slither. It grabs onto its own tail with its mouth and rolls like a wheel across the ground. It rolls after its prey with lightning fast speeds and is also said to uncurl at the last second to strike its prey with the stinger at the end of its venomous tail. The only way to avoid the hoop snake is to hide behind a tree, to which the venom will kill the tree, or to jump through the hoop that the snake makes and dodge it. Now, this may seem like a ridiculous fearsome critter, but in reality it's one of the more plausible ones. Snakes have been known to confuse their tails for prey and swallow themselves, making the shape seen with the hoop snake, and snakes like the dwarf reed snake have been seen moving at quick speeds doing a cartwheel style motion. The legend of the hoop snake also has similarities to the Ouroboros in Greek mythology and the Tsuchinoko of Japanese folklore, in which both of those also curl up into hoop shapes. Honestly, a video on Japanese cryptids and yokais would be a fun video to make in the future, but I'll put that one on the back burner. The hoop snake can also be found in many parts of the world, including North America, Canada, and Australia, but it's most prominently been seen along the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. The hoop snake has been featured in Pesco Bill stories, who is another folk hero big man like Paul Bunyan and John Henry, but was seen in American folklore beforehand, with this letter from 1784 mentioning the hoop snake. As serpents crawl upon their bellies, so can this, but he has another method of moving peculiar to his own species, which he always adopts when he is in eager pursuit of his prey. He throws himself into a circle, rapidly running about, advancing like a hoop, with his tail arising and pointed forward in the circle, by which he is always in the ready position of striking. It is observed that they only make use of this method in attacking, for when they flee from their enemy, they go upon their bellies like other serpents. From the above circumstance, peculiar to themselves, they also have the derived appellation of hoop snakes. Our next serpent is a joint snake. The joint snake is a little bit of a popular cryptid in American history, but you probably don't realize that. So I'll explain why that is in a second. The joint snake is said to be seen in the southern United States, but what makes this snake special is a joint snake can be cut or break itself into pieces and will reassemble itself. Some say that if a piece is taken and the pocket knife used to cut it is put in its place, the snake will fuse with the knife. In doing research, I came across a group of lizards that evolved without legs called legless lizards, with one group called glass snakes. These lizards lose their tail quite frequently, but can regrow them, which is possibly where the tail of the joint snake originated from. But going back to the American history part, you may have seen this image here. This is a 1754 political cartoon by Benjamin Franklin titled Join or Die. He used the image of the joint snake to depict the 13 US colonies and their disconnect at the time, urging them to join together and unify, and the image was later used in the Revolutionary War as a symbol of colonial freedom. So, who knew that a simple cryptid could have such an effect on history? I know I never realized that the image was showing a cryptid whenever I saw it in the past, so that's just really cool in my opinion. But keeping the snake train going, we have the snow snake. Reptiles are cold-blooded animals that live in warmer climates. The snow snake prefers the cold and is only active during the winter. Pretty straightforward. The snow snake is usually depicted as a highly venomous white snake with blue or pink eyes and usually blends into the snow with its coloring. Very similar in description to an albino snake. They feast on owls, weasels, birds, and other small animals. They normally don't bite humans, but if they do, tanglefoot oil is the only remedy, so make sure to carry some on you in the wintertime. Tales of the snow snake were used to prank people unfamiliar with the outdoors and were used to explain strange markings in the snow. One variation of the tale of the snow snake says that it actually freezes in the winter, and when lumberjacks would come across the snakes, they would place logs on their backs. Once the snakes thawed in the spring, they would slither down to the river for a drink, inadvertently carrying the logs with them, in which the logs would fall into the river, floating downstream to the sawmill. For the origin of the snow snake, it's said that they crossed over from Serbia via the Bering Strait during the Year of Two Winters. For those of you who don't know, the Bering Strait is a connection point between Alaska and Russia, and supposedly was crossable when the water levels of the ocean were lower years and years ago. And our final serpent for today's video is also the first in the video for our group of birds. That's because this next entry is a bird-reptile hybrid called the Snallygaster. The tales of the Snallygaster originate in Maryland and Washington, D.C. from German immigrants in the early 1730s. They reported seeing an eerie creature with the half-bird features of a siren mixed with nightmarish features of demons and ghouls, and called the creature Schnellergeist, which means quick ghost in German. You might be able to kind of see how the name evolved from Schnellergeist to Snallygaster over the years, but German settlers also gave this description of the creature. It's described as half reptile, half bird, having a metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth, occasionally reported with octopus-like tentacles. It was rumored to swoop down silently from the sky, snatching up and carrying its victims to their demise. Early stories claimed that the Snallygaster sucked the blood of its victims like a vampire. The superstitious locals even painted 7-point stars on their barns in hopes to ward off the Snallygaster. Reports of the Snallygaster seem somewhat sparse over the years from what I can gather, until in February and March of 1909, reports ramped back up again, this time adding more details to the creature's appearance. Newspaper accounts describe the Snallygaster as having enormous wings, a long pointed bill, claws like steel hooks, and an eye in the center of its forehead like a cyclops. It was also said to emit blood-curdling screams like a locomotive whistle. These later reports blew up in the news, and the Smithsonian offered a reward for the creature, and then-sitting US President Teddy Roosevelt reportedly considered canceling his trip to Africa to hunt the creature. If you guys don't know, Teddy Roosevelt was a big outdoorsman and a little bit of a cryptid hunter. He also established 5 national parks, so there's a lot to say about him in the mystery and conspiracy world. Might have to make a video on him too someday, but continuing on, the Snallygaster was said to have an enemy, the Dewao. I haven't heard much about this one prior to making this video, but it's described as a creature similar to a wolf with the stature of a human, almost like a werewolf. And it's said these two had vicious encounters dating back to the settling of Middletown Valley, where the stories first originated from. The next bird creature we have is an ominous one called the belled buzzard. Tales of the buzzard date back to the early 1850s and depicted simply a buzzard with a bell affixed to its neck, similar to a cat collar with a bell on it. For this one, the simple explanation that was confirmed was people tying cowbells or sleigh bells to turkey vultures as a prank, but over the years the tale developed into something more sinister. If you know the tales of the Mothman from West Virginia, multiple witnesses claimed to see the Mothman in the days leading up to the Silver Bridge collapse in 1928, and that led people to believe that the Mothman was an omen for disaster. With the belled buzzard, we have a similar situation. A belled buzzard could be seen flying around during the yellow fever epidemic of 1878. Ever since then, the belled buzzard was seen as a warning of disaster to come, even being called by some as an angel of death. Early reports claimed that there were multiple bell buzzards, but later reports claimed that there was just one belled buzzard, and was seen by some as some type of spiritual entity, it seems. One story claimed that there was only one belled buzzard, and it was belled during the War of 1812 and died after escaping, but was present in every big engagement following the war. Although sightings originated in the southeastern states, sightings spread over the years all the way up to New York and all the way south to Peru, so if you ever hear a bell above you one evening, prepare for the worst. Moving on from the belled buzzard, we have the more humorous Gillygaloo Bird. First mentioned in 1910, the Gillygaloo Bird doesn't have a physical description attached to it, but is yet another example of a critter known for its actions. This bird is said to lay its eggs in the snow, as the cold hatches them rather than warmth, and the eggs are cube-shaped with spots on them so they won't roll down hills. It's said that lumberjacks would hard-boil these eggs and use them as dice. Not much else to mention with this one, but we don't always need extravagant and detailed stories behind strange creatures. It just makes them a little more mysterious. And for our final bird, we have a goofy bird called the Goofus Bird, also known as the Philomelu bird and the Flufly bird. Described as an almost featherless bird with a beak like a stork and long legs, the Goofus bird is said by some to fly upside down to stay warm, and by others to fly backwards, not caring where it's going, and only wanting to know where it's been. Bear with me here for a second, but the previously mentioned Henry Tryon says this about the Goofus bird. A bird distinctly low in intellectual curiosity, showing complete and consistent indifferences as to where it's going. He prefers only to see where he's been, hence he always flies backwards. A rather rare species, frequently heard of, but seldom seen. Authentic reports are none too common. This is odd, for a turkey-like head on a long battle green neck sparsely spangled with large silvery scales, a black right wing and a pink left one make a color combination hard to miss. The nest is usually built upside down. The eggs, 7 to a clutch, are invariably grade D. The call resembles the clink of a Johnson bar being shoved into reverse. So yeah, I just hope you got all that. But I also want to bring up that this might actually be 2 creatures and the legends combined into one down the road, but tied into the tales of Paul Bunyan we have 2 descriptions. The version called the Philomelu bird is the one that flies upside down, and the version called the Goofus bird is the one that flies backwards, so take that all for what you will. For this next entry, we have probably the saddest creature on this list, the Squonk. I know the Hugag was pretty sad with not being able to lie down and barely eat, but the Squonk is more depressing. Unlike many other cryptids, the Squonk has had one consistent description over the years, and this comes from the 1910 book, Fearsome Critters of the Lumberwoods. It's said that the Squonk is of a very retiring disposition, generally traveling about at twilight and dusk. Because of its misfitting skin, which is covered in warts and moles, it is always unhappy. Hunters who are good at tracking are able to follow Squonk by its tear-stained trail, for the animal weeps constantly. When cornered and escape seems impossible, or when surprised or frightened, it may even dissolve itself into tears. Some later retelling of the stories bring the mood down even more. They say that the Squonk moves slowest on moonlit nights as it tries to avoid seeing its ugly appearance in reflections of bodies of water. I don't even know if the Squonk is real or not, but I feel bad for it. Imagine your whole life like that. I'd keep one as a pet and try to make him feel happy at least, but I'd have to search the hemlock forest of northern Pennsylvania to find one, because that's where it's native to. On the bright side, just like a lot of bad movies that have cult followings, so does the Squonk. Johnstown, Pennsylvania celebrates Squonkapalooza every year in August, so if a Squonk somehow sees this video and can understand what I'm saying, just know that there are those of us out here that love you, Squonk. For our penultimate entry, we have a fun, fearsome critter called the Teakettler, also known as a wild tea kettle. The legend of this cryptid comes from Wisconsin and Minnesota, and I just have to stop for a second. I came to the realization halfway through researching all these cryptids that most of them originate from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Now I don't know if that's because most of the logging from lumberjacks was done in those areas, or this list on Wikipedia just happened to be mostly from cryptids in those areas, or if you guys in Wisconsin and Minnesota just have this many cryptids running about. So if you're watching and are from Wisconsin or Minnesota, type in the comments if you've heard of any of these fearsome critters before watching this video, and if there's any others you know of that I haven't covered. But back to the Teakettler. We have a short description here, but it's depicted as a dog with cat-like ears and is named after the sound it makes, the boiling of a tea kettle. Clouds of vapor are said to emit from its nostrils, and it's said to walk backwards by choice, kind of like the Goofus Bird. There's also depictions of the creature having more of a teapot form, saying it was caused when a scientist fused his dog, cat, and tea kettle, but that's less of a common depiction. As the legend goes, only a few lumberjacks claim to have seen one, as the creature is so shy, but if a boiling tea kettle is heard and nowhere to be found, it could be that a Teakettler is nearby. And for our final entry to this long list of fearsome critters, we have the Wampus Cat. The Wampus Cat is the one I heard most about growing up, even though I knew very little of its lore and backstory, so I'm really excited to talk about it in this video. Now, in doing research on the Wampus Cat, I came to find more information on it than any of the other creatures, so what I'll do is give a sufficient amount of information on it, and make a follow-up video after this one talking about the Wampus Cat in depth, along with other cryptids that were mentioned in this video, but not looked at in depth, like the Silver Cat and Digmaw. The Wampus Cat has origins in both Cherokee mythology and lumberjack folklore like the rest of the creatures on this list. With these varying origins, characteristics of the Wampus Cat also vary, with some describing it as a comical creature and others as a frightful feline. The Cherokee legends tell the tale of a woman who was punished for hiding under the pelt of a wild cat to witness her husband during a sacred hunting ceremony, and the medicine man cursed her, forcing her to wear the pelt forever and turning her into the Wampus Cat. Another tale tells of a woman named Running Deer who wore a bobcat mask to get revenge on the Iwa demon that drove Running Deer's husband insane. The legend says that the spirit of Running Deer now inhabits the Wampus Cat and watches over her village. But getting into the depictions, the Wampus Cat has been described as a panther-like creature, sometimes as a half-dog, half-cat, sometimes seen with yellow eyes, and other times with green eyes. Some depict the Wampus Cat as an amphibious creature, and some depict it with 6 legs, and can occasionally be seen standing on its hind legs. Sightings of the creature can be dated back to the 19th and 20th centuries, continuing to this day. Residents in the Appalachian and southern regions of the US attribute livestock deaths to the Wampus Cat. In my opinion, the Wampus Cat is probably the most reported and popular on the list of cryptids I've talked about today. It's even the mascot for one of the houses at Ilvermorny, the American equivalent of Hogwarts in the Harry Potter franchise. But before we close, just be warned, if you have livestock, be very careful, as a Wampus Cat might be looking for its next meal, and your animals could be next. And with that, we have all of the fearsome critters I want to talk about for this video. After doing all this research and looking into some weird creatures I've never heard of before, it kind of made me wish we had more stuff like this. Sure, we have creepypastas and things like that, like I previously mentioned, but so much of that isn't very believable, and it's so easy with the internet to disprove videos and weird sightings. We kind of just lose that sense of disbelief, and nobody really cares about the unknown anymore. It's just like how there's so many videos of UFOs nowadays and the government confirming that they're real, and nobody even bats an eye. I just hope with this video I can somewhat ignite the spark that's disappeared over the years. I also think it's important that we can carry on these stories and traditions as they're so rooted into our history, as seen with the joint snake. Without hearing about creatures like the Wampus Cat growing up, I probably wouldn't be here telling you guys about it and wouldn't have the passion to look into mysteries in history. So I hope you guys will pass the stories down as well, a little bit of a passing of the torch from me to you, if you will. But this video is the longest video I've made on this channel. It's possible that it'll be longer than any video I've made on my gaming channel. So if you guys watch all the way to the end, I just want to sincerely thank you guys for watching. You're the real ones that are the foundation for this channel, and it'll help it grow immensely in the future. I know I've been lacking in uploads on this channel recently, and I apologize for that. I just want to start producing longer videos instead of shorter 5-minute videos like some of the previous ones have been. But the longer the video is, the longer it takes to come out, so I hope you don't mind. Plus, these longer videos about multiple different creatures will help me have more content for shorts to grow and draw attention to the channel, so that'll help. I'm close to hitting 1,000 subs on my gaming channel, unless I already have by the time this video comes out, so make sure to go sub over there if you haven't already. I'm very pleased with how both channels are coming along, and I have a ton of videos for both channels in store that I'm sure you guys will love, so make sure you like and subscribe to help the channel grow, and share the video with some friends so they can learn about weird and mysterious creatures like the Agropelter and Wampus Cat. And then comment below your thoughts on fearsome critters. Do you guys think any of them are real? If not, what do you think the explanations are? Let me know your favorite from this video, and be sure to tell me any you want me to see to cover in the future. But I think that's everything I want to say. I've done enough talking for this video, so thank you guys one more time, and I'll see you in the next one.